Sergeant Brodie. I'm with the Army National Guard, and I consider it an awesome privilege and opportunity to stand before you. I recently took on this role specifically for the resiliency coordinator, and that's where I liken myself. I'm the guy that motivates you. That's what I'm but also there's a secondary, if not primary, responsibility, and that is suicide prevention. And so during the first week I was on the job, I was looking for plenty of people and organizations to motivate. But during that first week, I received the 911 or 1 ASAP, a serious incident report that we lost one of our own, our sisters in arms. And so actions and steps, post-vention measures was needed to take care of that. So the brevity and the heaviness of the job really hit me, because not only motivation for those who are just going through, but to, as post-vention, to encourage others to as a survivor outreach process, how to get back into the fight. So before I get started, I just want to give you some brief highlights and comments. September marks the observance of Suicide Prevention Month, and I ask that all take time to reflect. I have an excerpt from the Chief of the National Guard Bureau, and he says, "Suicide is one of the leading causes of death in America and within our own military community. We are glad to say from 22, we're down to 20 veterans have commit suicides daily. We all must remain vigilant and ready to personally engage our fellow guardsmen. It is key for those experiencing suicidal ideations or who are spiraling downward to have connection and community and the engagement and support of those around them." And that's from General Linger, Chief of the National Guard Bureau. The North Carolina Suicide Prevention Program has a commitment to provide resources for suicide intervention, skills, prevention, and follow-up in an effort to reduce the occurrence of suicide behavior across the North Carolina National Guard. The Suicide Prevention Program targets and tailors training in order to mitigate risk and behavior associated with suicide. The function of the Suicide Prevention Program is to track demographic data on suicide behavior and to assist National Guard leaders in the identification of trends. The goal is to minimize suicide behavior by reducing the risk of suicide for the reserve component. The Suicide Prevention Program of North Carolina, in conjunction with the Army Suicide Prevention Program, has established a community approach to reduce the National Guard suicide through a function of the Community Health Promotion Council. And that is a council that we are currently implementing and bringing to full bore. We better known as the CHIPIC. The CHIPIC is a multidisciplinary capabilities to assist commanders in implementing local suicide prevention programs and establish the importance of early identification of the intervention with the problems and interventions with problems that detract from personal and unit readiness. The three principal phases of activities to mitigate the risk or impact of suicide behaviors: prevention, intervention, and postvention. In the prevention phases, we focus on preventing normal life stressors from turning into life crisis. Programming is focused on equipping the soldier with coping skills to handle overwhelming life circumstances. This includes early screening. Intervention includes alteration of conditions that produce the current crisis, treatment of underlying psychiatric disorder that contribute to suicidal thoughts, and follow-up care to assure problem resolution. Postvention is required when an individual has attempted or completed a suicide. After an attempt, commanders, non-commissioned officers, and installation gatekeepers should take steps to secure and to protect such individuals before they can cause additional harm to self and the others. Postvention also includes activities for unit-level intervention to minimize suicide contagion, strengthen unit cohesion, and promote continued mission readiness. Suicide may still occur even in the units with the best leadership climate and most efficient crisis intervention and suicide prevention program. So it's not a foolproof method. Therefore, it is important to redefine the goal of suicide prevention as being suicide risk reduction, which consists of reasonable steps taken to lower the probability that an individual may engage in acts of self-destructive behavior. The success of the health promotion, risk reduction, and suicide prevention program depends on the concentrated efforts of our leadership. It encompasses the 5 dimensions of being physical and emotional, social, spiritual, and family dimensions. One of the greatest barriers in preventing suicide is a culture that shames soldiers into believing it is not safe to seek help. Stigma can render suicide prevention efforts ineffective unless elements are incorporated into the programs to address cultural and institutional issues. Keeping personal problems or behavioral health issues a secret can result in the development of depression, anxiety, the ability to think clearly, difficulty in making decisions, and thoughts of suicide and suicide attempts. The stigma associated with receiving behavioral health care takes on an added significance in the National Guard. In addition to worrying about their careers and suffering embarrassment, soldiers have the concern that their commanders may discover that they are seeking treatment. The commanders need to know the physical and the mental health of their command, with soldiers afraid that it could affect their career. To combat the belief that seeking help is a sign of weakness, commanders are encouraged to reinforce the personal courage it takes to seek behavioral help. To be effective, any initiative taken to reduce stigma should address actual and perceived stigma of seeking help. Stigma is a cultural issue. Deliberate and focused effort to overcome, that we must be deliberate and focused to overcome. The key to stigma reduction is leadership emphasis at all levels. How do we do this? Awareness is an essential function of suicide prevention. How? Normalize the subject of suicide. Highlight the seriousness of the problem. Reduce stigma by encouraging help-seeking behaviors. More readily recognize the warning signs. Use the ask, care, and escort model to intervene. Use the battle buddy system. Involve resiliency building initiative to encourage and promote well-being for the whole soldier, physical, emotional, and behavioral and spiritual fitness. Observe Suicide Prevention Month by participating in suicide walks. We can bring awareness. This time right now, we have a volume number of slides, and so we're just going to point out some key indicators that we want you to know about the National Guard. Okay, just okay. Today, right now, we're at the Joint Force Headquarters. We're in the awareness room. Okay. The outline, and these are some of the areas that the presentation is going to cover. And since you have access to them, please feel free to go back and peruse these for enlightenment and educational purposes, just to see what the National Guard is doing. So we won't insult you by reading these, but these are the areas that we're going to, some of these areas we're going to cover. This is our footprint of the National Guard. We have 93 Army National Guard armories and 2 Air National Guard. So you can see we're looking at a population of over 11,000, including the Army and the Guard side. The stakeholders that is presented in the presentation, we look at safety. The focal or the headquarters of the suicide program is the resiliency, risk reduction, and suicide prevention. And underneath that, you have the resiliency and the suicide programs, but you also have other stakeholders that assist to make this process work. We have behavioral health, doing a fine job, stood up in 2010. We'll touch on those. We have the Chaplain Corps, who provides much needed support. And we also have the ASCAP, which is the Army Center of Substance Abuse, what we used to call the ASAP. where we funnel and so we submit our URIs. And we'll talk about that briefly. So these are the primary stakeholders that greatly impact the suicide prevention or awareness, or specifically the risk reduction for suicides for the North Carolina National Guard. The commander his concern is that IBHS, which is the Integrated Behavioral Health, it increases available access and referral to all support programs. In other words, when we have a crisis, this is the organization, 24-hour, 7 days a week, that we funnel those crisis and intervention individuals, we funnel them through that. And so the TAG's concern is that we also have the BHOP, which is another organization that basically deal with the medical readiness. And he's saying that we need these two organizations, but should we combine them? Because they look at suicides and they look at behavioral health from two different angles. And so yes, they're much needed, but the need to combine them because of their end states are differently. The North Carolina Army National Guard Readiness and Resiliency Update. North Carolina National Guard must continue to support the utilization of anonymous products such as the URI to identify presence of risk. The URI is a tool that when our units are deploying as well as when they return, we go out and provide substance abuse training, but in addition to that, we provide a survey. And encompassing the survey are several questions that identify ideations and thoughts of suicide, attempt suicide. And so once we look at that survey, it gives the command an opportunity to see what is the climate of their unit. And it covers a lot of other territories, specifically the suicide area. It identifies that. And also it deals with harm to others. So it addresses that. So that's a valuable tool that we use. And so that's one of our primary mitigation strategies, to see what's going on with our units that are deploying. Also, the numbers, it takes a while to update our numbers just because of the level of investigation. We want to make sure that we properly identify the causes of death and just not put a quick label on it. That process can be lengthy. So I have updated the numbers for 17 and 16, and this is according to our critical incident management system. So according to the numbers, and I just want to say this, the Army leads the way. But unfortunately, we lead the way in suicide too. And more specifically, the National Guard is the proponent of the Army that leads the way even more. So that's not a track record we're proud of, but it is, as they say, it is what it is. For current year 16, the number of ideations is 17, according to the CIMS system. The number of attempts was 5. The numbers complete was 1. In 17, the numbers that we're looking at now is 4 ideations. There were 3 attempts and 3 complete. So we have some dips there, but we see there are some increases there, specifically in the number of complete. We also have the Fatality Review Board, and what the Fatality Review Board, it basically tracks all deaths in the National Guard, whether they're a motor vehicle, they're motorcycles, they're suicide. And so this year, we can see that we do have 1 motorcycle accident. Now, at the time of this slide right here, it does not show that we actually are standing at 3. 2 of them confirmed and 1 is still on investigation. And so that is not captured here when we look at North Carolina and its fatalities. One of the valuable assets that we do have is the Chaplain Corps. And as we can see right here, they stay very busy. The chaplain contacts, 1,877, counselings, 353, suicide prevention, 14, and suicide intervention, 17. They provide relevant spiritual support to our assigned soldiers, airmen, and their families. Some of the challenges that they're faced with to do their job is the Defense of the Marriage Act, just the training that's required for that, casualty notification, SHARP, one of the big things we're seeing right now with hurricane relief, tornado, we see defensive support of civil authorities. So getting out and being on call to help support that, the training that's needed for that, and just normal admin support to just provide professional development for their staff. Also, the number of Catholic chaplains, and some of the future opportunities we're looking at is collaboration and synchronization with active duty, becoming a up-tempo and just tying it with them. And also full-time staff of chaplain. We just don't have enough. I am the State Resiliency Program Coordinator. Here's a storyboard right here, and we have a couple of snapshots right here of our support staff that has helped us in some of the events that we have carried out throughout the previous year. And one of the things we know, and you're going to see this continually being iterated, is that would be the number of veterans that commit suicide. Earlier we spoke about the CHIPIC Council is a holistic multidisciplinary council that's basically utilize the process where we take all of our stakeholders together, and in doing so we're able to utilize and maximize our resources. So it provides economies of scale. And these are some of the working groups that formulate that council. At this time right now, I just want to thank you for your time right now. There are things that we can do to enhance the process. We're looking at our training and what the training provide. We are seeing some increases in our number of trained personnel. This year, currently in our resiliency forces, there was a slight dip. But what we believe that to maximize suicide awareness, it all starts with reducing risk. And in doing that, we utilize our training as well as making sure that our key leadership come on board and set the tone. But to reduce the stigma so that people are not shamed to seek help. And in addition to that, it's not to show our soldiers that it's not weak. Just like medical help and medical help is important, also mental help is important. So I thank you for your time.